It all started with a single bullet, a .45 slug from an assassin's gun. Born in the Philippines, trained in Iran, his name was Mian Than, just one of the millions of Muslims worldwide furious at China for its role in the purges of Islamic people across Asia. China's supreme military leader had been killed, and Iran had put the gun in the assassin's hand. Collectively, the world held its breath and waited. China's reaction was expected to be swift, brutal, completely unforgiving. It was. What had begun merely as deadlock over who would replace the chairman spiraled into full-scale civil war. As the cards fell across Asia, lines were drawn, sides were taken. Meanwhile, in the U.S., we remained silent. Not that we had much time to care, we had our own troubles. The economy was shit, the two-party system had fractured, national morale was at an all-time low. After generations of war in the Middle East, half the country wanted nothing more than to wall up the borders and forget the rest of the world even existed. Some called them the new isolationists. Others said it was a return to the home front. In the end, all that mattered is people were sick of it all. Sick of the politics, sick of the agendas, sick of sending our boys overseas to conflicts that nobody could understand. But not all Americans were ready to withdraw from the world. Then, on October 8th, 2031, a King Lung-class submarine slipped undetected into Tokyo Bay. When the final damages were tallied, Japan had lost 2 freighters, a fuel tanker, and a fishing trawler. More than 120 lives were lost, including 2 rescue crews, who were trapped in the burning slick of fuel that was oozing out of the Shinmaru. 2 weeks later, the United States officially entered the war. Now, I wrote that over a decade ago, and while it isn't dead on, it's a little creepy to read it now. That was from Titanium Rain, which you can, by the way, get on Audible and listen to in full, or get on Amazon, but only as digital. Link in the description. Anyway, I knew you guys were going to ask about it, so I decided, screw it. I will do a World War III stream and address all the issues. Very clearly, everyone's losing their shit. Everyone's worried we're headed into a third world war. And I am the Gen Xer who had spent his childhood being told that this was the war I would be awaiting. It's kind of weird. Decades and decades of being told over and over again that I wasn't going to have a future. But I'd never reached 30. That, by the time we hit 2000, we either be starving or the environment would completely have killed us all, or that, Jesus would come back and nukes would fall from the sky. And it was really hammered into all of our heads that we would never have a future. And it really does seem that old Grandpa Joe and the boomers seem hell-bent on giving us that war. I'm not thrilled. I think if I was 16 years old, I probably would be losing my shit right now, but frankly, I'm just annoyed. Will we go to war with Russia, China, possibly the Middle East? Well, the real answer is, can we, really? I mean, at top condition, the United States had always had a military capable of carrying on a two-front war. And Trump was doing a very good job of restoring that military while trying to make sure we never had to use it. And old Joe Biden came in, and the first thing he did was dismantle all that. And now he seems to want to go to war with that military he's dismantled. He's basically undone everything Trump's done. He's gone out of his way to kick out all the experienced and trained people to replace them with woke wussies. I mean, really, are we really going to go to war with China with pregnant women as door gunners in helicopters? Seriously? Will this be World War III? Frankly, honestly, yeah, probably will be. How involved will we be? Well, there's one other factor that no one's really talked much about. What about the fact that we're teetering on a war here at home as it is? The Union isn't really held together all that well. And this, again, was all done by Biden and his people. Although it seems now more and more they keep stumbling and saying President Obama. Have you noticed that? Kamala has said it. Biden has said it more than once. Jen Psaki has accidentally said it. How many other people are going to accidentally say President Obama. So is he really pulling the strings here? Is this his third term? Is this what he really wanted? It's a massive fuck up, thoroughly, utterly, and completely. Am I worried about nukes flying? Well, no, not really. I think that's the nice part about all this, is that we live in a world where the stage is very, very different. The lines are not very clear. This is not two ideologies facing off. And honestly, neither us or Russia really wanted to fling nukes at each other. The dangerous situation we see now is that we've got the Ukraine, and Putin's probably going to take it. I mean, Biden was dumb enough to give him permission. And if Putin moves on Ukraine, China will probably move on Taiwan. There we go. We have a two-front war. Are we going to fulfill our duties to those two fronts? NATO is mobilizing in Europe. They're not mobilizing in the Sea of China or the Gulf of Tonkin. Think about it. We have nothing going on Cam Bay. Why? And I have a feeling we're going to leave this to Europe for the most part. I mean, it would really be moronic of Biden right now, with the economy so weak, with the country so divided, with so much of the country ready to split as it is. What's he going to do? He's crippled himself. These people have no fucking clue what they're doing. They hate the military, but yet they love sending them off to kill people. Have you noticed that? Usually if it lines their pockets. Interesting, yeah. Japan is in a precarious situation, although, remember how Trump kept saying, look, we should just let them have their military back? And that started getting China really nervous, right? Well, Japan apparently is now kind of already violating their self-defense force agreement. They are patrolling outside their waters. They are positioning ships in places they're not supposed to. Good for them. I hope they build nukes. Scare the Chinese a little bit more. As far as flinging nukes, though, the last thing China would want to do is hurl a nuke at us while they're going after Taiwan. That is the worst thing they could do. It would hurt us. It would annihilate them, basically. Russia, they're far more threatening on the nuke front, but on the other hand, they don't want to rule over a crater too. They just want us out of the way. Really, the real risk is the fact that we are seeing saber rattling in the Middle East. And, well, thanks to Biden and Obama and everyone to precede him, well, Iran has probably got nuclear weapons now. Thanks, guys. That wonderful agreement they supposedly put together. And that's the real issue, because they have said over and over again they plan to nuke Israel. That could happen. Sorry. I mean, I know no one wants to think about that. That could happen. There's also the fact that there is uprisings in the UAE as well. And let me tell you, if the U.S. is busy with other things, it's a prime time to go to war with or have a civil war. This is what's happened, is essentially Biden and his fuckheads have crippled us, and we couldn't really do anything about it if we wanted to. And our military leadership is very incompetent right now. So there's that as well. Okay, let's see. You've got questions here. Taiwan number one. If it looks like they're really going to get overrun, we should actually start taking refugees immediately. We can actually just box up all the people in San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland, and just swap them out. So here, you live in Taiwan. We'll move the Taiwanese into these cities. I'm sure they'll get the shit and needles off the street in overnight. We don't want you. You guys want to be communists anyway. Get the fuck out. If Ghost in the Shell has future sight, Japan is going to become a superpower because of World War III. Well, only if they do the Japanese miracle and create a device that can get rid of radiation, because that was actually what did it. The Japanese Self-Defense Force has always been a military in practice, if not on paper. They have the capability to stymie Chinese for a while if they have to, but they're not a permanent solution. unless they've got more off the books that we haven't been informed about. And who knows what went on when Trump was over there with them. But yeah, the thing is, Asia is scared shitless of Japan just because of the history. Japan seems to have a real knack for taking a small force and causing a lot of trouble. Okay, what do you got here? What happened, Ishii? What did Corn Pop do this time? Well, you're looking at it. The weird thing is, almost all three chief co-belligerents in World War III are paper tigers on their way in one way or another. China is built on tofu drags. The U.S. is a woke clusterfuck, and Russia limits. Well, the thing is it would be very easy to work things out with Russia, and the fact is that the Democrats and the neocons don't want to. You remember, if Hillary was promising World War III with Russia if she got into office, and well, if it is in fact Obama puppeting, well, here we go. They have really got it out for Russia. They want the Cold War to come back. They want all that arms money to come back. And yeah, we've pretty much crippled ourselves. We were on a comeback streak under Trump. The number of things he did to fix all the problems in our military was legendary. Actually, it's a shame we never really got to hear much about it. I only knew because I knew a lot of military guys and had talked to Kat's dad, who worked within the DoD. So World War III we've been fighting Russia in Syria. The Iraq government wants to join Russia. Turkey, yeah. It's starting to look a lot like World War I, isn't it? I would have to agree. China is very much a paper tiger. They're far better at dirty tricks and being complete assholes, but they've also pissed everyone off. And they're not Russia's friend, and Russia knows that, and Russia's not their friend. Russia learned very early on not to trust them. The only people China care about are China. Although what would be funny is for war to break out and the SFWA to have the Worldcon convention in China like they planned. They wanted it in Beijing this year because the SFWA, Science Fiction Writers Association, now basically licks China's crack. They're all pretty much loser communists now. Thanks, John Scalzi. Me personally, I didn't vote in the election since both candidates are jackasses, in my opinion, even though my dad was pressuring me hard to vote for Biden. Well, let me put it this way, Fizz. One jackass was restoring our economy, had basically put money into infrastructure, had put money back into NASA and revived it, had actually been the only president ever to do anything in actual asteroid defense or hardening the electrical grid to solar flares and EMP. He also was essentially taking the money out of all those bureaucratic pockets in the Pentagon and actually putting it to the military. He was bringing peace overseas. And frankly, I can tell you my take home and my taxes were a fuckload lower as a independent contractor under Trump. But I mean, preferably, if you see that as exactly the same as who we've got in office now, good for you. World War III, Japanese redemption arc. The Olympics starts on the 4th. Anyone else want to see some heart attacks? Vietnamese hate China more than the U.S. government. Actually, it's weird is that we've got a decent relationship on some levels, or at least we used to. Our trade was improving with them drastically. But again, that depended who was in office. But yeah, ultimately, here's the thing. None of the players are the powerhouses that either they want to present or what they once were. Another thing to consider about China is they're not nearly as well equipped as everyone thinks. A lot of their engineering isn't all that great. The Chinese Sukhois do not work very well. They're shitty engineering. You would really prefer to buy a Russian one if you wanted a Sukhoi. The Indians learned that the hard way, that they were buying planes for, they were buying Sukhois from the Chinese and realized they were getting bum products. And so they instead went and bought MiGs from the Russians. Also, another thing is their military doesn't train as much as you'd think they would. Our pilots train daily for combat. Theirs, it's about once a month. Also, their Navy and their Army really isn't tested right now. They have not seen active combat on the scale they're looking for. Ours have quite a bit, in fact, although the X factor here is that Biden went out of his way to start firing all those people and booting out all of the combat hardened conservatives that had been in the military. I know the draft is the worst case scenario, but even if it does happen, I'm dodging. I don't give a shit. Hate me for it if you want. Why would I hate you for it? Stop caring about our government. Well, look, why would I hate you for dodging a draft to go to a war that should have been avoidable? Seriously, if we get caught up in all this shit, it is entirely the Democrats' fault. They set this up. Why? Why would you want to die for that? I see no reason to. No, not in the least. I mean, unless we're personally threatened, I don't see the issue. Okay. And as far as a draft goes in a worst case scenario, well, here you go. You remember Biden and his friends kept talking over and over again how we need to start drafting women. It's because they know they don't have the numbers. And they know that see, let's face it, right now, the only people in this country who really, really are behind Biden are white, upper class and middle class, college students, and middle-aged women. That's it. Those are the only people that give him a high approval rating. I mean, of course, there are also the retired boomers, but whatever. The hippie generation is never going to wake the fuck up. I think that's pretty obvious. I wasn't trying to imply you'd hate me. I just normally expect, oh, you don't care. No. I would consider us getting involved in this as illegitimate. They pretty much nurtured and fueled the situation. This would have never happened if it had not been for the clusterfuck that was the Biden administration and the stage that was set by Obama and his Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. This is their fuck up. And it's amazing that it only took a year for Biden to undo all the good that Trump had done military-wise and foreign relations-wise. We were moving towards a global stability. You can't have that now, can we? Okay. I can't dodge the draft. There's literally just Poland between... Yeah, well... the thing is, if the Russians roll into your country, you better be ready to start shooting at them. I know the Poles are. As far as I understand it, just about every Polish citizen's ready to do battle if the Russians show up. And being that they were occupied by the Soviets and the Nazis, I can understand why they would be ready to start shooting at anyone who rolled into their territory. You lost your job for not getting poked, to Weldy? Well, all signs point towards we're probably going to see an absolute end to all that shit very, very soon. So maybe you can get your job back. Well, Biden's even losing the white women too. Really? Finally. He's finally losing the college-educated, NPR-listening, latte slurping, bagel chomping white women of the coasts. He's losing the NPR crowd. He really, that amazing. Took him long enough to figure it out. Bill Maher is finally just beginning to figure out that, hey, maybe this was a bad idea. Maybe the other guy was doing a better job. And that Bill Maher, always about a year behind, if not 5, but hey, he eventually catches up, right? How much you want to bet they're going to just secretly put Trump back in to avoid World War III? Who would? Who would put Trump back in? No. I mean, these people would never do that. He was the antithesis of what they wanted. And the thing is, if we're stable and happy, no one's going to vote Democrat. That's the thing you've got to understand. And the Democrats have pretty much taken the mask off. They don't give a flying fuck about the working class. They don't give a fuck about the poor. They don't care about the fucking environment. They don't care about anything other than their free labor and their nice lifestyles and their corporate masters. That's it. And we've been kind of on this path with the Democrats ever since Bill Clinton sold the Democrats to the Chinese government. And he did that. China was his number one campaign contributor both times around, and they were funding Hillary. I mean, we're really shocked. I'm working in a blue-collar roofing company now, and oh, good. Hey, much better. That's a much better situation. Good for you, sir. I quit my job because they won't let me work unless I get the jab. What were you doing? You know what's interesting is the number of people here in Arizona. And I mean, things are really lax. I mean, the only people that really give a fuck about COVID here anymore are the university students and the California and East Coast transplants living in Phoenix. That's it. Everyone else is like, fuck it, who cares? It's bullshit. But Rite Aid still requires that their physicians, or not their physicians, their pharmacists, get the jab. And a lot of them, they can't fill their prescriptions on time anymore because so many of their staff have just walked off the job and said, screw this, I'm not doing it. I am not doing it. Yeah, I think the thing to really keep in mind is, despite all the hyperbole, all three powers involved, as I think it was, which one of you said it? One of you said it, that none of the world powers involved here are really in top form right now. Everyone's got their own budgetary and internal problems as it is. China is not in a great position. They're coming on as strong. They're presenting this image of invincibility because they aren't. And really, the only reason they're moving now is because they know if Russia makes a move, we can't move on them. It's that simple. The worst case scenario really is that China, Iran, and Russia all move at the same time, and we're divided between three fronts. But then the question is, would the Biden administration really even do anything if Israel got attacked? I mean, would they? That's a good question, isn't it? I have a feeling we're just going to see more limp-wristed back and forth from Biden, just like everything. He has been ineffectual, weak. He can't seem to stick to any decision. So yeah, I don't see it changing any. I mean, fuck. The Joint Chiefs are pretty much terrified of China. They don't want to piss China off. Really, I think before we see anything major, I think the more likely scenario is if things really went to complete shit, I could honestly see some retired generals getting pissed off enough to lead a coup. The amount of rage the military, retired military are feeling, especially brass, towards this administration is incredible. Is war also part of the Great Reset? Think about. No, the Great Reset ultimately was to avoid exactly the situation they helped foster. The Great Reset crowd, Davos, started as the Club of Rome in 1973, I believe. And it was essentially Klaus Schwab and a bunch of rich fuckers who all got together and decided, well, we need to figure out a new thing for humanity to unite under so that there won't be any world wars. And they decided on, well, let's make the environment the enemy. We're poisoning the environment. And every prediction, and I do mean every prediction they've made about the Earth freezing, about the ozone layer, about global warming, you name it, every fucking prediction about us all starving in 1999, all of them have been dead wrong. They have never been right. And over time, this, let's unite the world against pollution turned into let's unite the world against humanity. Humanity is clearly the problem, is what it's turned into. And these guys are all aging out. They're basically, the grave's not that far away for a lot of them. And I think they're really trying to complete their world dream. It's kind of interesting that Schwab was probably a Nazi, by the way. He was raised in the war years, by the way, in Germany. So that's their crowd. I mean, they don't want a third world war. And they completely failed, just like the League of Nations with Harry Truman, who essentially the League of Nations was the idea that, oh, we'll prevent any more wars. What did they do? They essentially ushered in a war. Their meddling fucked everything up because they thought, well, if we do these things, it'll prevent a war. No, it pissed everyone off. And it's the same thing all over again. The weird thing is where do the cards fall? How is this all going to come together? As I've said, the real nuclear threat here is not really China or Russia, or even us for that matter. The risk is Iran and Israel going at it because they have nukes. Israel says they don't, but they do. And Iran, I think, has functional nukes now. So the question is, whose missiles work? That's one thing a lot of them keep having problems with, their delivery devices. And the thing about the hypersonic missile from China, maybe it works. Maybe they've gotten it to work. Chinese engineering is shit. It's always been shit. It's not very good. Seems like the European Union negotiating their way in their own way in this mess. Yeah, they're definitely to blame for a lot of this too. Of course, deep down they view themselves as an empire. I think they were kind of hungry for a war, and I guess they thought we were going to fight it for them, dumbasses. And that's why Trump scared them, because he made it very clear we weren't going to be their mercenaries. Yeah, Canada is basically sold out to China. That's pretty much clear. My family all called Joe Biden Biden buyer's remorse, but well, better late than never, I guess. Or wait, did they not? I hope they didn't vote for him. I mean, really. China has 50% of their dams destroyed or severely damaged in the hail. Yeah, China is not the powerhouse they present. They really, really aren't. And they really are risking their own civil war. They've kept it quiet, but the discord and anger and the disorganization in that country, it could happen. It really could happen. And the other thing to realize is the mentality of Chinese business and government is, one, everyone is screwing each other. Everyone expects to screw on each other. Everyone gets along with a mutual network of needs. They don't have friends. The mentality is, if you can screw someone, do it. If you can fuck someone over, do it. Think about that. Just think about that, okay? The military would put Trump back in. Yeah, they would, actually. The reset crowd is not the war is good for business crowd. Those crowds basically diametrically opposed. Yes, thank you, Horizon Talker. But it's amazing how often the war is a bad crowd who think they're going to prevent war end up contributing to what causes a war. And keep in mind, it was specifically the very liberal-leaning, if not red, factions within Germany that kept letting communists in and kept trying to turn the nation communist that led to the Nazis taking over and essentially helped contribute to what happened, what became World War II, essentially. The world, Eloise, calm down on that one, seriously. The sun goes through constant fluctuations. Actually, it's going through a quiet phase pretty soon. But the idea that it's heating up, I mean, okay, technically on a scale of billions of years, yes. But I don't know where you heard that, but seriously, in fact, we're actually due for another mini ice age. So, oh God, how do you say it's the is it the Yarkovsky or the cycles? I forget what they're called. Yeah, where did you hear that? I want to answer that one. When will the false flags happen with you? Well, that's already happened, Mullet Turtle. All this UFO stuff, frankly, I think it's mirageman work. It is, again, them trying to distract, and it's not working. The thing is, in the past, it's been very effective. It's not working this time. Part of the reason is that Gen X and younger, you say, oh, well, you know, UFOs are real. Everyone says, and? No one freaks out. It just like, and? Okay. They're just not getting the reaction they used to. But yeah, all that stuff about the flying tic tac, I think it's ours. I really do. And it's probably partially there to scare our enemies. But that's a distraction. That did not just get out now for it was there purposely. The fact that Harry Reid and John Podesta are all for this UFO stuff that we're hearing now, and the fact that what is it, the ATIP whole that all that was John Podesta's creation. These are all psychological warfare to distract and keep us focused on something else, and it's not working very well. I thought South Africa. No. Oh, is that what happened to South Africa's nukes? They gave them to Israel. So when are we getting televised war? Every war is televised now, dude. Don't you remember Gulf War 1 and 2? The invasion of Afghanistan, the failure of Afghanistan, all of it was televised and streamed. Clinton administration said they wanted to remove logic boards from our Minuteman missiles to reduce the chance of nuclear war. They said they changed their minds. Maybe they did it anyway. Well, it doesn't matter because Trump was going out of his way to actually modernize our nuclear stockpile to one, it was horribly out of date. A lot of it was 1960s technology, and he was updating it partially to make sure that shit didn't happen. Seems like the only thing China is good at mass producing is shit. My thoughts too. I want to skin some reptoids and pound some tail with the white poon or a tall white poon. Well, that stuff's going on in your neighborhood, Trenton, so it could be. The problem with China is they can afford to lose millions of their citizens and soldiers. Yeah, but do their citizens and soldiers want to? Are they agreeable? Are all of them agreeable? I know that they've got a large population of people that are willing to die because they're drones, but then a lot of them really aren't all that cool with this. So, yeah. The thing that allowed Mao to take over is he had popular support. And China has this bad habit of the cycle that they've repeated for millennia. Since their first emperor, strongman comes in, brings order to the land, they start to get successful, and in a generation or two, some limp-wristed eunuch or puppeted prince ends up in charge, or a bureaucrat gets in charge, and it all collapses and falls apart. And then a generation or so, and then another strongman comes in and unites the kingdoms, and then it starts all over again. And let me tell you, Ping is acting a lot like one of those eunuchs from the medieval era of China. Maybe I'll do a lesson sometime. Actually, I bet Yang would do a better job than I ever could about the Chinese eunuchs and the various manipulative concubines that were running the country whenever a soy boy took over or was put on the throne. China can't even power their country. They're too dependent on it. Yeah, and they're too dependent on our food. China don't have farmland they need, plus what they have is shit. They still need number one foreign buyers of U.S. soil, though. Yeah, Bill Gates has bought a lot of farmland, but not nearly. I hate to say it, but it's a numbers game. You look at what he really owns. They make either he's making it sound like more than it is, or the press is, but it's not nearly the massive amount that everyone thinks. It's a stats game. The scientists are paid off. COVID told us exactly. When China overthrew their last dynasty, they also ripped up the social fabric that made them a mutual beneficial commerce practical. It's the big part of the nation that's why it's so cutthroat now. Yeah. Why is China suffering a population decline? Because they were too effective with their one-child policy, and they have too many dudes. Ishi, can we please do a cast on the Weimar Republic so we know a little bit about that historically? Sure. I mean, my knowledge is kind of specialized on it, but yeah, I'd love to do a deep dive into the Weimar Republic. It was a pretty nasty scenario, and I hate to say it, it's not all that different from the one we're in now. I'm a little concerned that if I do one on the Weimar Republic, I'll get banned, or I'll basically piss a lot of people off, because it reveals a lot of things that don't go well with the narrative. It's the narrative we've been taught, and the one that we are comfortable with is that one day the Germans just woke up and decided they were very mad and hated Jewish people and wanted to rule the world. And that is not the case at all. A very good starting point to really understand the Weimar Republic, the social climate, not the politics or anything else, just the social climate, is to watch the film M, the letter M, by Fritz Lang. It's an extremely good film. It is a precursor to film noir, and it is one of the few real honest glimpses into the Weimar Republic and what was so critically wrong in that country. But to give the short version, you had a senile old fart running the country who had no idea what was going on and was pretty much being puppeted by his advisors and whoever owned him. You had horrible inflation and the economy crashing because of the prior war and the fact that Europe and the League of Nations decided they were going to make Germany pay for it all, and the League of Nations being the precursor to the UN. And then on top of that, the German people, now here's the thing that most people don't know. This isn't part of the narrative. Fuck it, I'll tell the story. Germany prior to World War II was the least anti-Semitic nation in Europe. It was the most welcoming, and essentially they were considered the friends to the Jewish people. But the thing about Germans is they have this notion of we Germans. It's not an I, it's we. There's this kind of group identity of what it means to be German. And when they let in all the Jewish migrants and business owners, they expected them to adopt what it meant to be German. And some did and some didn't. And there was always this notion of, well, no matter what happens, we Germans will get through it together. We Germans support each other. And it turns out that the Jewish banks and a lot of the arms manufacturers and businesses supplied both sides of the war during World War I. Second, the media, which was, I'll be honest, media entertainment was largely Jewish, was very pro-communist. And they were willing to profiteer off of misery. What I mean by that is that they were more than willing to put very debaucherous, questionable material. They owned the cabarets and the prostitution. And during the fact that the nation had become so impoverished after the First World War, there was extreme desperation, and a lot of these cabarets and prostitution rings, and again, were primarily Jewish ran, were using drugs to get kids, specifically little boys and girls, addicted and then working in the sex trade, either on stage or in the bordello. And that, I don't care what anyone says, that was apparently the moment that made old Adolf snap, was specifically going back to his hometown and seeing that is what it had become. It had become drug-ridden. It had become full of essentially red light districts with kids being prostituted and hooked on drugs. On top of that, you had banks that were essentially lending money that didn't exist. They would write out a check and say, oh yeah, we have it in the bank. And so they were spending money, and you can imagine what money that doesn't exist would do to an economy, right? Not only that, they were using the economic situation to purposely drive property prices down and repossess the goods of the German people. And it was very, very predatory, with predatory loans, predatory practices in general. And, I'm losing listeners. I must have offended people. What had happened was initially, and I do mean initially, when they were going after Jewish businesses, it was primarily the rich they wanted to get. And you often hear about these situations in which the Nazis would storm in and take everything from these families. As far as the Jewish families being raided, initially, and I do mean initially, it went out of control. And none of this is a good situation. All of this is bad. I'm just put it point blank. There is no good scenario here. This is all terrible. This was essentially every bad thing that could happen did. Essentially what happened was that initially the auspices of the Nazis taking everything was, well, we're just reclaiming what they took from you. And there was some truth to it. But then it just kept going and going and going. And then it was, okay, well, we're going to put them in camps. And then it was, okay, well, we're going to start exterminating them. Well, we're just doing it to the rich. And then it was everyone. And it just kept going. And the thing is, the German people have a habit culturally of brutality. I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend anyone, but there is this, this Goth mentality. They were this slaughtering tribe at one time. They were the nation or they were the people that defeated Rome and were proud of it. One of their great legends in Germany was Arminius, who was a German warlord who had been indoctrinated into the Roman Republic and had become a centurion and came back to conquer his land and then turned on the Romans and used the equipment and the gear to kill all the Romans. And it was that notion that we can do this that is kind of at the heart of German fascism. That myth of Arminius is a tale that is used over and over again. If you hear the tale of the Teutoburg's forest, which is this massacre where they brutalized all the Romans and apparently cut them to shreds and hung their entrails from the trees. And to this day is apparently something that's celebrated and is this great moment in their history. That is kind of the thing they tap into when German fascism comes about. And it wasn't just World War I and World War II. This came up multiple times in their history where suddenly nationalism in Germany would surge up, and this idea that they were this conquering tribe that could not be defeated, that they were savage and bloody, would take over. And it was part of the German mythology, and it still is. And so I guess just like every other time that it had happened, it started with targeted anger, and eventually they decided, hey, let's genocide a race. And I'm not saying it's right. I think it's terrifying, honestly. And I'm just hoping that if the United States, which looks like it's very much in a Weimar Republic state right now, that we're not Germans. And that's really the one thing that I keep coming back to is, yeah, it is scary to think that we are very much like the Weimar Republic. But the difference again is we're not Germans. We were the great melting pot of the world. We were founded on the libertarian values of Jefferson and the founding fathers. We weren't the slaughtering tribe. We were the idea that you could come to America and get rich, we were the nation that class was bullshit, that anybody could come here. It didn't matter what your past, whether what your story was, you could make it. Whether it was true or not, that was our mythology. Our mythology was not the slaughtering tribe. And that's one of the reasons we need to teach our history and hold on to our culture, because that's one of the best things about us. The last thing we need are these divisions, and the last thing we need is communism, and it's a war against oppression and all that shit. Because again, the Nazis too, they used that same narrative. Oh, we're the people taking the war to our oppressors. Same thing, same damn thing. Now, the other thing that was happening in the Weimar Republic is that you had all this profiteering on misery. And you also had the rich businesses and the politicians who were communist in themselves. They had communist sympathies, were letting in communist agitators. And there was like active gang warfare on the streets. Not unlike Antifa, by the way, and Black Lives Matter. They were letting in, I forget what nationality. They were letting in a whole bunch of foreigners over the border for cheap labor, and a lot of them were communist agitators. And anytime anyone would speak up, the press would smear them as, you hate foreigners. Oh, you're an anti-Semite. You're a racist. You're a bigot. Sound familiar? And it didn't, the press just decided they'd just start making shit up. It didn't matter what the reality was. Oh, the economy's great. There's no crime on the streets. Oh, our leaders are totally in control. Everything's wonderful. How, if you say otherwise, you're a racist bigot. Sound familiar? And the police were completely they were completely defunded. They were feeble. They couldn't do anything. They were understaffed, and they would just let crime happen. In M by Fritz Lang, which again is a film you need to see to understand this, the story is there is a child killer loose on the streets. And I'm going to pull this up on IMDb. I want to get everything right. It's been a couple of years since I've watched it. I own it, actually. There's a really good edition from Criterion, although I believe you can probably see it for free on YouTube. Oh, this is great. I punch in M, and the wonderful, wonderful thing that's IMDb gave me Madonna. Okay, Peter Lorre, M. Yeah, that's right. That was the film that kind of got him known. Peter Lorre was in M. And by the way, it was Hungarians. That's who it was. They were letting Hungarians across the border and flooding the nation with communists, right? Now, here's the story. Peter Lorre, a Hungarian Jew, plays a child killer on the streets, and he is mentally ill. He can't help himself. And it even kind of shows that he has a sexual thrill when he kills. And the police won't do anything about it. They can't do anything about it because, again, they're feeble. The politicians keep pretending, oh, it isn't happening. Oh, don't worry. The press is just milking it for all it's worth. Oh no, how many poor people are going to die? And just fear mongering. And the rich, the super rich, are sitting around in their parlors. Oh, it's so awful what's happening. Oh, what can we do? Oh, I guess that's just how it is. Darn. While this child killer is loose. And so finally, the criminal element decides, fuck it. We're going to take care of this problem. We're going to fix it. And the mafioso who leads the charge looks very much like a Nazi. He's a good Aryan man. He's got the leather. I mean, he looks like a brown shirt through and through. And that's intentional. And he leads essentially a band of criminals to police the streets. They finally capture the child killer, and they hold a kangaroo court before they kill him. And what the killer says at the end when they judge him guilty, the killer says to all of them, I can't help what I do. I am mentally ill. I can't control myself. I'm in hell myself. You've all chosen this path. You get a choice. You don't have to be this. Hence the message being, this child killer can't help but be the monster he is. And the reason he exists is everyone else failed. They let him in the country. They let him run amok. You see the point? That was Weimar Germany in a nutshell. All right, let's see. I've probably got a ton of comments here. You bigoted piece of shit. Oh, okay. Yes. Wow, there's a lot here. Seems like it taken a turn. Everyone's talking about Fallout. Was the talk that dull, guys? Let's see. Before World War I, Germany had an anti-Semitic party. That's what it was. Yeah. See, yes, that is true. But it was the least anti-Semitic nation still, okay? Keep in mind that the noble French and the Brits and all the other... No. Actually, come to think of it, France is still a more bigoted nation. It's probably the most anti-Semitic nation in Europe right now. Let's just say that it wasn't necessarily the most welcoming place to begin with. I think that's one of the reasons they thought Israel would fix everything. It's like, okay, well, we don't... now you have your own country, leave. I'm serious. I think that's what they really thought was going to happen. And it didn't. I think really the big problem is over and over again, because this is a repeated pattern throughout history with Judaism, is that they are a wandering people. They're house guests no matter where they go, and they've got a very, very insular culture that discourages race mixing, even though that's kind of failed here in the United States, frankly, for the better, honestly. And culturally speaking, it discourages adopting the culture around it. And that sets up problems. Hell, I mean, do you know what the celebration of Hanukkah really is about? Really? What happened was the Hellenized Jews didn't like the fundamentalist Jews, and they wanted to be more Greek, and they went to war, and the fundamentalists won. That was the framing, and that essentially the heroes of that story, the fundamentalists, essentially had started waging war in Greece, attacking and waging battles because they thought that would get God to start talking to them again. So yeah, this is a very old problem. It's a very insular culture that has long discouraged embracing the culture it's entered, and that's going to cause problems. It's going to piss people off. I mean, another example, for instance, was during the Hellenic period. The Jewish community in Greece liked the fact that the thing was talismans were a very popular thing in Greece. Magic talismans that were blessed by the shaman or whoever. It's lucky trinkets. It might as well be a St. Christopher's medal or a crystal or whatever, a rabbit's tail. That was fashionable and a cool thing in Greece. And when the Jews started saying, oh, well, I want one of those, and they all started wearing them, the rabbi said, don't do that. No. And they forbade it and made it forbidden to wear those things. And you know those weird boxes that they put on their forehead and on their fists? I forget what they're called. Those were actually created as an alternative, and the rabbis sold them to them, saying, here, no, these are yours. You're special. You don't need one of those rabbit's foots. You got these. And it was, again, just another way to say, look, don't adopt the local culture. And that's been a long ongoing thing. That's going to cause problems, especially for a culture that wasn't a melting pot. I mean, Germany, the we Germans. Yeah, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. So I'm going to go through here. The media has always been willing to make money off misery. Yes, that is true. There are old notes from Walt Disney himself on how America and even Hollywood itself was pushing for Nazism because they loved the idea of communism. Yep. Hollywood got taken over by Reds in the 40s. It's kind of sad to think that Bogart was a fucking commie. Supposedly Sinatra was too. I just don't see how, but whatever. But what about Hitler himself being an occasional male prostitute? He probably wasn't proud of it. Of course, supposedly, and I don't know, supposedly he was Jewish himself, so who the hell knows? I always thought that was a weird one, because that's often brought up by saying, well, he was a self-hating Jew. It's like, well, I don't know. Do you really want the greatest Jew killer in all history to be Jewish? That's pretty unpleasant. Okay. I've been talking about how young boys being enlisted into the Nazis were being groomed and molested by those generals. Yeah, that's true. That is absolutely true. There was a very homoerotic element to the Nazis, as well as plenty of BDSM. But that's why they had such fashionable uniforms. Yes, there were plenty of gay Nazis. That is actually true. I mean, look, they were Nazis. Did you actually expect them not to be hypocrites? Come on. That's kind of like expecting the commies to not be hypocrites, right? It's the reason the Soviet Russia had an aristocrat class. Think about that. Okay, so you guys are talking about gay Nazis on acid. Going through your comments. What's the name of that movie again? M. M by Fritz. Well, let me put this up. In fact, you should see most of Fritz Lang's films. The guy is a genius. You want to see a good movie director, see his films. I mean, everybody knows him for Metropolis and for M, but he's done some other really good stuff. During the noir period, he did some good noir films himself. One of my favorites, actually. But there you go. I put it in the chat. Someone like Noelle Stevenson, who pushes misandry lesbian agenda, made a setting for Shira that mimicked the grooming and abuse the Nazis did to the young men. Think about Rebecca Sugar as well, with the imagery she put in Steven Universe, and the fact that Steven Universe itself is just full of really, really ugly racial stereotypes. But yet, that's the progressive vision. Barwin Studios says the problem with Judaism tends to be continuously returns to Baal worship, another golden calf. Yeah, apparently at one time, I've been doing a lot of reading on the subject, that they were Baal worshippers at one time, and that at one time Yahweh and Baal were essentially the same character. Also, I was reading, apparently the concept of redemption is a monetary transaction. Yeah, Razorfist has the best videos on Red Hollywood. Really, I'm just going to keep returning to the same thing. We're Americans, damn it. We are not Germans. We're not Russians. And frankly, I'm not really a fan of the idea of being something first and then American, frankly. You know, the idea of, oh, I'm an African American. No, you're an American who's black. Really, that's how we have to think about it. I'm not a mixed race American. I'm a fucking American. And I think being mixed race is about as American as you can get. And the fact that I'm even half Irish, that makes me even more American, right? The Irish seem to have had sex with everybody. But really, I think the real strength here is if we would just really hold on to what made us great to begin with, which is the fact that we aren't one of these freaking aristocracies out of Europe, that we aren't a kingdom, that we didn't start from one of these old nations, that we started on a dream of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and that really that should be the backbone and the focus of our national identity. And that the fact that we're being robbed of that is one of the worst things that could possibly happen. The 20s, Germany was pretty communistic in its laws. Well, they wanted to be a communist nation. And you know what really disgusts me is back in the 90s, how many liberals I met in San Francisco that used to speak of Weimar Germany as this wonderful free time, that it was finally becoming like the 60s there. And it was a dream that the Nazis ruined. It's like, you're sick, you know that? Seriously. Hell, Jello Biafra of the dead Kennedys used to speak well of the Weimar Germany. Douchebag. As if the Holocaust wasn't enough to smear funny mustache man. For some reason, they think it won't stick, so they overplay their hand. I hate to say it. This is just my personal opinion. I think that the Jewish community has allowed the Holocaust to be profiteered too much. Hollywood and all these people looking to make a dime have cashed in on the idea of the Holocaust, and it has cheapened the historical moment to the point where it's lost its meaning. Nazi has lost its meaning. The ugliness of World War II has lost its meaning. Apparently, if you don't get vaxxed, you're as bad as a Nazi. Bad as the Holocaust, apparently. Seriously, when it comes to that, when every Republican president has been compared to Hitler, it loses its punch. It doesn't mean anything anymore. It really doesn't. And I don't think any level of education is going to fix that. Really, I just don't think education will be able to fix it. We've become completely immune to the notion. It's just like the race card. Nobody cares anymore. Okay, so the black community, when they say, well, this happened because I was black, even if it's true, we don't care anymore because we've heard it so much and it's been overused. And I think that the damage has been done. I don't think there's any going back, honestly. Another thing that's really bad about constantly calling people white supremacists and Nazis and, well, any other name in the book is when the person you're calling that is reasonable. Think about that. Okay? Think about it. If a person is reasonable, and a lot of the people being called Nazis are the reasonable, sane person in the room, people who are uneducated are going to think to themselves, oh, well, if that's what Nazism about, maybe I'm one. And I'm not shitting you. I mean, it's like the best recruitment material you could ever give a white supremacist. It's call the sane, reasonable people white supremacists. Okay, we can be the min manufactured by Henry Ford in its melting pot, or we can be the product of Berkeley balkanization. You know, for all the crap Ford gets, I mean, I'm really tired of this idea of portraying people throughout history as either one thing or the other. Either they're saints or they're devils. That's pointless and stupid. You know, H.P. Lovecraft can be a horrible bigot and an amazing writer. You know, Lovecraft didn't kill anyone. Lovecraft didn't hurt anyone. All he did was say things people didn't like. You know, there are plenty of people in this world that said all the right things and have done horrible things, Joe Biden. Hell, I would say most of the pedos in the SFWA say all the right things, but they've harmed children, done unforgivable crimes. And we've got to really let that go. Yeah, Ford had some really, really strange views, but also he didn't have the hindsight of history. And also he was a man of his time. And for whatever failings Henry Ford had, he created the middle class. He was the person who started a business with the notion that it should benefit the workers, not because he was a communist or a socialist, but because he believed in the American spirit. He created the middle class. He wanted to create products that his employees could afford. He wasn't the fucker that was running the company towns. The Irish have sex with everyone, so that's why I can historically why the historical Irish hate. So that's why the historical Irish hate, because they were Yeah, well, look, no, the Irish are an irritable people. Okay, we're great storytellers. Apparently, some of us can be great comedians. I'm not. Apparently, we can be charming. I'm not. I got the storytelling and the morose part, apparently. But yeah, they're also an irritable and violent people. You know, before the Irish cleaned up their act, the Irish were actually the most violent people in the United States, not the black community. And I'm not sure, I'd have to go back and listen to the Thomas Sowell video where he talks about how the Irish became the American success story. But essentially what we think of now as Chicago's worst areas or Baltimore, a century ago, that was the Irish American experience, but it pulled itself out of that. But yeah, the Irish are violent people. They do have a lot of domestics. They drink a lot, and we're irritable. And I think part of the reason that it doesn't bother them is that they can laugh about it. They're not sensitive. You can call them potato heads or, well, there's actually an ethnic slur that I find particularly funny. I mean, I suppose other people who are maybe half Irish or whole Irish don't find it funny, but I think it's utterly hysterical, and I don't mind if someone says it to me. Actual term used by white supremacists, because they don't consider Irish real white people, right? Potato enners. You fill in the blanks there. I'll change a letter. Potato diggers. Now replace the D with an N. Frankly, I find that insult hysterical. So, silence probably isn't ideal, but I'm trying to find more comments here. The vax mandate is fascism. That's not even in question. And I'm glad that at least half the country is standing up to it. Who also forgot to mention the anti-socialist communist that was the vocabulary of the estate, who owns the book and art to hide, Dr. Seuss. Wokeism has really just been a bane upon this country, and I really shudder for you poor millennials out there who are sane, because in a lot of ways, I feel like you guys are kind of the lost generation. I mean, technically, Gen X is the lost generation because nobody remembers us, and we're kind of in the minority. But you guys are the generation of lost opportunities. You had so much, and let's just say the social good fucked you guys bad, really bad. Schools, sheltering, Barney, bubble wrapped world really screwed you guys up. And for those of you who survived, I applaud you. You're stronger for it. But Jesus, that was a real crime that was done. And now that you've got all these kids who are essentially 12-year-old adults, that you can't fix that, can you? I have this horrible feeling that the millennials are in for the midlife crisis, to end all midlife crises. That, one day they're finally going to wake up and realize they're not children anymore, and just go into a rage and realize, hey, wait a minute, I cut off my dick, or I've changed my gender, and it was all for fashion. Yeah, we were thrown away, Janelle. Jesus, Janelle. No, fair white maiden. We were. Jen, we were thrown away. We were generally not wanted. We were the ones that ruined the party for our parents. They got to be kids until they realized they'd had kids. When does Gen X start? Let's see officially. It kind of fluctuates. Supposedly, it's babies starting anywhere between 1965 to 69, depending on who you ask. I used to hear it was starting at 1969 was the date. Now they're saying 65. I don't know. Thereabouts. Essentially, it was the children of the 70s and 80s who grew up in the 80s and 90s primarily. Well, the Jews are happy to go out of their way to say that they aren't quite white. I don't even want to go there. I really think the biggest problem with that community is the group identity. That, again, it would be better to be yourself first, and then your culture, whatever second. And it seems the other way around. It's like I said, it's like Black America, African America. Why is that the first thing? Why not you be you first and then all that other stuff? I mean, when you'd ask me what I am, I wouldn't think race. That would not be the thing that comes to mind if you asked me what I was. Honestly, I'd say I was a writer. That would be my first thought. And I think these people that when you ask, well, who are you or what are you? And your answer is either an ethnicity or a religion or a Zeezerism, transgender, flexi, whatever, there's a problem, because they're not individuals. They're thinking of themselves as a demographic, as a group, as a clan, as a tribe. And I don't think that's good. I really don't think that's good. I mean, if there's going to be anything that we're going to be first, let it be Americans. And by Americans, I mean as envisioned by our forefathers. What about the ones born in 1989? I think they're still technically Gen X. It says here, it says now it's born between 1965 and 1980. Supposedly, we're all between 42 and 57 right now. Who knows? Those numbers aren't hard. They keep changing. Supposedly, millennials were from 1981 to, I don't know. None of these agree. There's some European blood in the Ashkenazi Jew with Khazar. The state of Israel was right to return, was the right of return to all Jews. And I think that's, again, the Ashkenazi tend to be far more mixed and more willing to adopt other cultures from what I've noticed. And within the community, I've noticed this whole concept of more Jewish than thou. And that doesn't seem like a good recipe for getting along with people. That seems like a really nasty scenario anytime that happens. I mean, one thing you can give Christianity credit for is anybody can be a Christian. And if someone starts pulling the more Christian than thou, they're committing the sin of pride. So, whatever. I think that was one of the real strong points of Christianity, is that things like race and all that other crap doesn't really matter. Anybody can be saved. Unless you're like me and you just don't believe anything. So you just don't believe in miracles. So I guess if the Christians are right, I'm just screwed all the way around. But yeah, sorry, don't believe in the miracle aspect. Good religion otherwise, though. Oh, already. Boomers hate Gen Xers because we told them to go fuck themselves when they wanted us to carry the establishment torch. Yeah, that's absolutely true, Janelle, in every way. When they wanted us to be little hippies and whatever else, we told them to go fuck themselves. We got nose rings and they hated us for it. 79 is the tail end of Gen X. Yeah. My sister was born in 84 back today. She was Gen Y. Gen Y is the interesting one because they aren't quite millennials. They're like Gen X, but better adjusted. A little better off, a little more sane, a little more bulletproof to the Depression, I think. And then the millennials happened. Yeah, they weren't the shit show. I mean, when Gen Y happened, I was like, hey, how good. You guys are better adjusted and better educated than we are. We're doing fine. And then the millennials showed up and that dream ended. As a Gen X black person, Ishiro, I can tell you most black folks tend to think of themselves collectively instead of individuals. And that's what a lot of the black listeners have told me. And I don't think that's good. I really don't think that's a good thing in the long run, because when a group all voluntarily sends the message that we're a group, suddenly the crimes of one do become the crimes of all, especially if everyone starts defending that crime. I mean, frankly, if a white or a mixed-raced person or an Asian person crashes a car, runs over some kids, or does some horrible crime, it's that person's fault. Fuck him. Has nothing to do with me. That guy's an asshole, and I can say so. The problem comes when there's the need to feel that you've got to protect the collective because they're one of you, be it black, Jewish, or are there any other religions or ethnic groups who really see themselves? Well, maybe Islam. I don't know. I think within the United States, those are the two real insular groups that have that clan mentality the most, or to me at least, my observation. And I don't think it's done them any good. I think there is a need to separate. I mean, when you saw the white supremacists down at, what was it? We Will Not Replace Us at, was it Ferguson? And I know that there were all these groups that kept saying, that's what white people think. It's like, no, that's just what those assholes think. And nobody held that on their shoulders. No one felt that weight on their shoulders. It's like, no, I don't have to take responsibility for those assholes. They're assholes. It's not my problem. Whereas when the BLM riots happened, it did seem like a large percentage of the black community felt like they needed to defend it or speak about it, or somehow it was on them. Now, granted, they were tagging themselves as Black Lives, which I guess is, in a sense, saying they speak for the group, but no. Islam is the worst in groupthink. Yeah, well, okay, there you go. Charlottesville, thank you, not Ferguson, Charlottesville. There's been so many of them now, Harble. I feel like I need to keep a list. Well, Asians like Chinese tend to stick among themselves, but they're also very good at adapting, or at least entering into other cultures and not, I guess, standing out. Do you know what I mean? That clannish behavior doesn't seem to clash with the larger culture around it. I had neighbors back in San Diego who were native Chinese. I think they were immigrants, and they were first generation. No issues whatsoever. They had adopted Christianity. I don't know if it was out of necessity or if they believed, but they were a Christian family, but they were very, very Chinese. And they were very, very much viewed themselves as Chinese, but I don't know. There wasn't that standoffishness at all. I remember once I gave their kids a bunch of comic books that I was going to throw out. No problem. No problem at all. The Indian family next door, when I made the same offer, took them and threw them in the trash and gave me a really dirty look. And they wouldn't talk to anybody. They stuck among themselves, didn't want anything to do with you. Hi, neighbor. Nope. You got kind of the fuck off look. Where, if you wave to the Chinese dude on his way to work, he'd smile and wave back to you. It's not hard to do. I'm a Muslim, and I know that doesn't make me evil. The Quran says to be tolerant of other religions. Well, there you go. To LD, I was born in Saudi Arabia in the heart of Islam. I was hated for being black and Christian. Oh, shit. Yeah, and I know that Saudi Arabia has its own real issue with fundamentalism. From what I understand, that the Christian churches and the synagogues there actually have to gather in secret with guards, from what I understand. Could be wrong on that, but that's what I understand, at least. Doesn't sound like a fun place to be honest with you, even if they do give away free money. My local Chinese community dates from the 1930s. They are older than the CCP by far. They helped build their... Yeah, exactly. And, when you visit a Chinatown, you don't get the sense of, hey, get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? I've never had that sense. Same thing with like Little Saigon. Never gotten the, hey, get out of here sense. I will say when I was in Oakland or in Compton, I felt like I was probably going to die. Indians from some areas are very racist. I've never had any issue with Brahmins. They just think they're better than everyone else. But yeah, I don't know what caste these guys were, but they were not very nice, and they were very strange. They kept burning stuff on their doorstep. Fair Maiden White says, I found this past year that I'm part Middle Eastern, less than 5%, but I'm more than Middle Eastern than Elizabeth Warren is Native American. Well, it depends on what you mean by Middle Eastern. I mean, there was a lot of back and forth between Persia and Europe. And there's a lot of evidence to show that the Persians, the Turks, and I believe the Hungarians can be traced. There was a lot of that blood can be traced all the way back to Egypt, believe it or not. So there is kind of a logical through line from Egypt to Persia to Europe. That's not surprising. And if you've ever seen an Iranian, frankly, they're whiter than most of us. Have you ever noticed that? Actually, they're really sexy too often. A huge tits. Okay, I think I should probably call it a night. I have to go back on the air at 8 o'clock with Janelle and Kat anyway. I wanted to do this cast because I knew you guys were going to ask about everyone talking about World War III, and I wanted to essentially answer those questions before so we can talk about things other than Biden and possible war. And if you guys... Okay. Oh, now you guys are talking about genetics. Anyway, before we go any further, you want to get my take on a possible World War III? Something I got eerily right, written about 12 years ago now, Titanium Rain, it is linked in the description. Please go over to Audible and check it out. I think it's only $5, so I mean, it's really worth it. And if you've already listened to Titanium Rain, please, for the love of God, review it. Some people get it, some people don't. It's a really great production, but because it broke from tradition and didn't do a lot of the traditional things that a radio drama does, some people didn't care for it. But anyway, you want to get my take on World War III? I actually already wrote it. Just don't ask me about World War III. No, I don't think we're going to be lobbing any nukes anytime soon. Is it worrisome? Yes. Is it the end of the world? Probably not. That's my take on it. And now go buy my Titanium Rain because I need the sale.